Welcome into episode 442 of the Skate Podcast. I am Brian DeFelice, joined by Bridget Prue and Scott McLaughlin. Bridget, Scott, and myself, we want to get to a couple of opening shifts just regarding the current events of the NHL and the latest happenings with the Boston Bruins. But before we get into any of that, Bridget and Scott, today marks part one of a multi-part Bruins offseason mock-up situation where the three of us will be putting on our GM hats and we will collectively be deciding which RFAs the Bruins should sign, which they should let walk, if any, and for how much they'll be resigning for. That will bleed over into our unrestricted free agent class and additions for the Boston Bruins. And we'll be talking about the head coach hire. We'll be talking about who they should draft at 7 overall. And just in general, just off-season additions and subtractions as proposed by us here at the Skate Podcast in a realistic manner, obviously with all the figures in mind, salary cap, projections, and everything. So
I spent hours yesterday trying to get cap compliant with my my ideas. I sat on my computer and just trying to get cap compliant but put together an actual team that I thought had a chance. It was tough.
I did some homework and then I went to go see the new Final Destination movie, which, guys, it's sick. Sick movie.
Oh, I hate
really good.
No.
What is it? Just a bunch of highlights from the 24-25 Bruins season, or
yeah,
is that what it is?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, it just shows the death of each player they traded away. Just get it. Don Sweeney just offing forwards.
Scott,
I hate scary movies. I definitely will not go to see that.
Scott, how much GM mode and EA Sports have you played over the last couple of days to prepare for this?
Yeah, a lot. I mean, a lot of it is stuff obviously we've been talking about for a while. But yeah, we're in the idea of looking for off-season content. We came up with this. I did something like this a few years ago for weei.com, just in written form, and people seemed interested. So, obviously it's a little silly because so much goes into an off season, and it's all it's going to take is one move to completely derail what we're doing. But I think it is important to note to people these aren't predictions; these are what we would do. So this is we're taking over the Bruins front office. We're barricading ourselves in. Don Sweeney, Cam Neely, they're all gone. And so this is just us making the moves that we would make. We're going to debate them. We haven't sent each other our sort of, our ideal moves and what our roster ends up looking like. So hopefully we will have some debate and disagreement. And, I think we're just going to do simple majority rules. If there's a decision we're not in agreement on,
then we pick Scott out and we go with what Bridget wants.
That's how Bridget thinks it works, but it's actually going to just be 2/3 rules.
I'm not going to lie though. I spent way too much time on this, and even I could not come up with something that I 100% was confident in liking it completely. It was really difficult just because the amount of cap space you have left, if you do want to add a big piece, you're then scrambling to try to fill in the other holes, and you don't necessarily like the balance of your roster or whatever, so you redo it and you redo it and you redo it. And so I have a feeling that though I keep joking that I have great ideas, I think we can probably work together to come up with some better ones, because it's not really a simple answer, and we don't know what each other made.
No.
My spreadsheet itself took 8 hours.
Yeah, well, and it speaks to something I've been saying since the deadline, which is just how much work this team has to do. So yeah, you're right. It's no matter what kind of moves you come up with, you look at the roster and you're there's still a hole there and a hole there. And I would have preferred to go get someone better for this spot, but it's yeah, okay, that's their reality. They sold at the deadline. They didn't have a very good team anyways. And now there's an awful lot of holes on this roster that realistically just are not going to all be filled in one offseason.
Yeah, basically what I did was I had tried 3 different main additions, and then just played out the process of how to fill in the rest with that amount of cap space left, and I got rid of the first 2 that I tried because the rest of the roster just looked like crap. I was like, I can't do this. Like, I have to go through and make some better decisions on how to spend the money more evenly. I don't know. I went through the exercise like way too many times, and we're about to do it again. So
Yeah, I mean, I think like Scott said, the three of us haven't really discussed much of any details on our opinions. So hopefully this is going to play out pretty organically. And again, it's going to try to be realistic based off of the information that we have and only the information that we have. So for example, we know what the NHL salary cap is projected to be next season. We know what certain players are projected to get in the offseason with new contracts. And we obviously know the holes that the Bruins have and how we can try to rectify that. But at the end of the day, and Scott said it, like there are certain things that we can't prepare for. Does Don Sweeney have a couple of hockey trades up his sleeve that we just aren't privy to? Are they going to offer sheet somebody? Like, there's only so much we can really do. So the best way we're going to go about this is just try to start with the restricted free agents, and then see how much money we have to work with after that, and then go from there. But before we get into this exercise, Bridget and Scott, I did mention that couple opening shifts. I think this is just a general touching base. So the NHL is down to their final 4 teams. It is the Toronto. No. Sorry, it's not Toronto. Obviously, they didn't advance and win Game 7. So we have the Florida Panthers versus the Carolina Hurricanes in the East, and the Dallas Stars.
I can't believe the Leafs didn't get it done.
Oh,
I really thought this was finally their year.
You're a bad liar. You're a shit liar, Scott. You're a shit liar. Yeah, we have Carolina, Florida in the East, which is a rematch of the 2023 Eastern Conference Finals, I believe.
Yep.
And then we have the Dallas Stars versus the Edmonton Oilers in the West. Is that a repeat of last year's Western Finals?
It is.
Going to be a great series. I mean, Dallas has loaded up even more so in the last calendar year.
Yeah, like you felt like last year that series, it was, the Stars are deep, but the Oilers have the star power, and no pun intended, and so they won. Now the Stars have their own star with Mikko Rantanen, so that absolutely changes the dynamics. He has been the best player in this postseason. Just so many exciting players to watch in that series. The Eastern Conference, I guess, probably not as sexy on paper, but we know what the Panthers are trying to do, trying to repeat, trying to get to a third straight Stanley Cup final. Carolina trying to finally break through to a Stanley Cup final. It feels like they're in contention and have a chance every year and never get over the hump. So big challenge for them. Frederik Andersen has been playing like, maybe along with Jake Onger, like the best goalie left. He's been awesome this postseason. So that's going to have to continue if Carolina's going to have any chance.
Is there anyone left in the playoff? Well, I guess, all right, JK, there's definitely a few guys. Like a few of the guys that I had in my additions to the roster in free agency are still in the playoffs, and including there's someone on Dallas. So we'll see. Well, that's a tease. So guys, do you guys have any other thoughts on the playoffs?
Well,
I mean, Marchand obviously is very, very close to officially getting the Bruins a first-round pick. It just needs to play tonight, right? So
yeah, if Marchand just plays Game 1 Tuesday night, he will have played at least 50% of Florida's games, no matter how far they go, because the highest number of games they can possibly play if these next 2 rounds go 7 is 26 games. Marchand has already played 12. He's played all 12 so far. So, the 2 conditions of that trade for the Bruins to get a first-round pick was Florida winning 2 rounds, which they have now done, and Marchand playing at least 50% of all their playoff games, which he's now 1 game away from doing. So, look, that does matter. Like, I'm not going to say it makes the trade feel good or that it's even enough in return. Obviously I think we all thought at the time that wasn't enough in return, even with the limitations, because Marchand was injured. They worked with him to send him to a team he wanted to go to. But if it gets upgraded from a second to a first, like, you do feel a little better. Look, first round picks matter. And even if Florida is still good enough come 2027 that it's later, like it's still something. It's still better than a second. So it's more valuable to you. It's more valuable trade capital if you use it as a trade chip at some point. So that does matter. I guess that's maybe a tiny bit of a silver lining for the Bruins.
Yeah, and it's also not just that he's played 12 playoff games for the Florida Panthers. It's that he is leading the team in scoring in those 12 games. He's tied with his line mate. Is it Etu?
Etu
Luostarinen?
Luostarinen, yeah.
Luostarinen? Those Finnish names can be tricky, but yeah, so he's obviously been an integral part of their first 2 rounds so far, and I don't see that diminishing. I just, you look at the Panthers and you could say maybe Matthew Tkachuk has been a little quiet, but I think he's obviously fighting through something, which most players are this time of year. But he didn't play a game from 4 Nations until round 1, game 1. So he's nursing something, but you expect him and a couple other players to also have their moments as these playoffs get into the 3rd and 4th rounds for these teams. But Brad Marchand, from a Bruins perspective, I know people feel certain ways about the trade from a sentimental perspective and maybe from a logistical perspective as well. But at the end of the day, this pick is going to be a first rounder, as Scott mentioned, and maybe just maybe one of your favorite Bruins ends up winning a Stanley Cup. And is it with a team that has knocked you out of the playoffs the last couple of years? Sure, but at the end of the day, this is professional sports is a business. I mean, players play a lot of. You see a lot of GMs and coaches around the league that are winning Stanley Cups in those roles, and they played their entire career in the NHL for a different city or vice versa. Like these guys, once you're in this NHL network, you've coached, you've played everywhere. Like it's just a business. And as fans, you get emotionally invested and tied to those who come through your city. But for them, it's just the business that they're in. So not that they don't have love and sentimental value for those cities as well, but it's just the business. So I'm happy for Marchand. Maybe he plays old friend Trent Frederick in the finals. Maybe.
Hey, both of them are going to be free agents again. I would be lying if I told you that I didn't have a scenario where Marchand was one of the people I added back to the team.
Bridget, you keep teasing this too much. We're going to end up doing the same
right
now.
Because I spent so much time on it. I need to get to it. I need to say what it looks like.
Yeah, I had one final funny note from the playoffs, guys, and wouldn't it be hilarious if Mikko Rantanen ends up playing the Hurricanes in the finals as well, because obviously he goes from Colorado to Carolina. He's there for a cup of coffee. Then Carolina trades him to Dallas, which comes back to bite Colorado in the ass, getting a Game 7 hat trick, ending their season. And obviously the Hurricanes didn't do anything wrong to Mikko, so it's not like in the cup finals he'd be getting his revenge on the Hurricanes. But it would be quite something to see Rantanen go from Colorado to Carolina to Dallas, defeat Colorado in round 1, and then play Carolina in round 4. That would be quite the individual story arc.
Yeah, it's just like the Mikko Rantanen season. Like everything just revolves around him.
He's the main character.
Yeah, it is fascinating. Like it's good for Carolina getting this far. They clearly had, I think, the easiest divisional path to get through. It would be fascinating if like this is the year they actually get past Florida or maybe even win the cup, because this is sort of the culmination of 2 years of sort of failing to land and lock up the star forward that they've been looking for. Right? There's the Jake Gensel trade. They didn't re-sign him. Now Rantanen, they bring in, they can't get an extension. They trade him away again. And obviously I'm sure they hope that, that Logan Stankoven develops into a really good player or those picks become something. But I kind of wrote off the rest of their season after that, because it was like, well, they just took a big step back, like now they don't have Nachas or Rantanen. And yet here they are. And like I said, if I had to pick it, I'll take Florida in 6, maybe even 5. I do think Florida's a much better team, but again, goaltending can be the great equalizer. Anderson's been awesome. Bobrovsky has been okay. Maybe not even that this postseason. So we'll see.
All right. And one final note before we go into the part one exercise today is just checking in on World Championships. I will tease, and maybe I'll give one of you two an opportunity to look up the name specifically, but the Bruins did sign a depth goaltender. But before we get to that, just World Championship check-in. David Pastrnak and Elias Lindholm are tied for first and second in scoring over in World Championships right now. One of David Pastrnak's teammates is technically ranked above him, though they both have 5 goals, 7 assists, 12 points in 6 games. And then Elias Lindholm is tied with Nathan MacKinnon in scoring, 6 games each, 6 goals, 4 assists, 10 points. So I'm not sure what that tiebreaker is. Maybe it's alphabetical, or maybe, well, I guess yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the tiebreaker is if they played the same games and have the same points, but
yeah, I can't imagine there's any tiebreaker. I think they're just tied.
maybe, yeah, I know. I just don't know how they decide to rank. Maybe it's just
the tiebreaker is scoring another goal.
someone's got to go first, and I didn't know if it was like ice time or plus minus or something. I don't know, but anyway, that's your Bruins Worlds check-in. That's heading into action on Tuesday. I do think the Czech Republic plays USA today. So
yeah, and Jeremy Swayman has played 1 game since the last time we talked, when we talked about him struggling. It was against Kazakhstan, so I don't know how much you can read into it. He stopped 16 of 17 shots, 6-1 win. As again, you would expect, like the U.S. should blow out Kazakhstan. I don't know if he's going to be in net for this game against Czech Republic, but that's going to be going on. I think that'll be starting while we're recording, so not really worth getting too much into that yet.
Oh, it's a good thing I brought my second laptop then, because open that up.
Yeah. So you mentioned that the goalie they signed, and it is a Czech goalie, Simon Zajíček, I believe is how it's pronounced. Yeah, interesting organizational depth. He's 23 years old. Played in the Czech Extraliga, which is Czech Republic's top pro league, and led the league in save percentage this year with a 930. He went 15-13 overall, 2.12 goals against average. He's 6'2", 187 pounds. His team got knocked out in the first round in 3 games, but he had a 927 save percentage. So, yeah, look, the Bruins have 2 AHL goalies who are both going to be unrestricted free agents on July 1 if they're not re-signed before then, in Michael DiPietro and Brandon Bussey. So, maybe this is a sign that they anticipate losing at least one of those guys. You could certainly see them maybe looking for an opportunity where, they might have a clearer path towards NHL playing time, or at least towards an ability to compete for the job. Bruins have Jeremy Swayman and Jonas Korpisalo locked up under contract for several more years. Maybe they trade one of them, tease towards a possible discussion later in this episode or next episode. So we'll see what we decide to do. But yeah, or they just like this kid and want to give him a shot. He was undrafted. He's never played outside the Czech Republic, but you see those kind of numbers in a pro league for a 23-year-old. And even though it's not, one of the very top leagues in the world, seems like a kid worth taking a chance on, in my opinion.
Okay, so let's get into the crux of today's episode, which is going to be Bruins RFAs and who we're keeping, who we're letting go, and what we're signing those we're keeping.
Yeah, we'll do their UFAs too. So like all their own guys.
Yeah.
Yes. So before we do that, we have to hire the coach. So, Bridget and Scott, do we have a unanimous decision on this? I mean, I think I know who I would want to go with for timing and just, and it might align with Scott, but I'm just going to float out the name Marco Sturm. And
that would be my guy.
Okay, so Bridget, do you have much disagreement there?
Well, I actually had Misha Donskov as my coach. However, Dallas moving on to the conference finals kind of throws a wrench in it. He's the assistant coach there. We talked about last episode, maybe needing a little bit of urgency to sign someone, so then you can start putting forward your next plans on who you want to sign, who you want to add that falls into that coach's system. But I do still think that there's a way to continue to pursue Donskov, and just by because Don Sweeney already probably knows just from having conversations with him when he was brought on to the Four Nations Canadian staff, like I think he probably has a decent idea just from other conversations in the past what kind of team he might want, what kind of style he might want to put together. And so that's who I went with, though I do like Sturm as well. That would have been my second one to bring up. So I'm totally happy with going with Sturm, but I did want to put out that I just in terms of like fitting the bill, like checking the boxes, I think Donskov actually checks more boxes that Sweeney wants. He's had pretty extensive NHL experience as an assistant coach and in other roles as well. And like I said, with International Hockey Four Nations, he worked with Sweeney with Canada. I personally think he's more qualified. He is also older, so if you wanted to go with like the new voice, new ideas kind of thing, maybe he even though he hasn't been in a head coach.
Yeah, I was just gonna say like that would be the one big knock that in my mind would make him less qualified than Marco Sturm is he hasn't been a head coach. He hasn't been at any level. So, that's not to me like that's not a small thing. Now I like Misha Donskov. Obviously, we've talked about him before, and I would not at all mind that hire. In fact, I'd be pretty excited about it. I like the idea of kind of taking that chance on a new guy. But I do think being a head coach previously, in Marco Sturm's case at both the AHL level and the international level, and then I would also throw Jay Woodcroft in as one of my, I would say like top 3 guys along with those two. Jay Woodcroft's been a head coach in the NHL. So I do think like that, to me, that is a knock against Donskov. It's not disqualifying at all, but just in relation to other candidates who have been a head guy.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. I do think that Marco Sturm having a head coaching experience in Ontario the last 3 seasons, I believe it is, it's that to me isn't something to overlook when it comes to comparing him with Misha Donskov. And again, timing is of the essence here. So with all these decisions that we have to make with RFAs and our own UFAs, I do think that there's validity and merit to having our head coach locked up and decided on. And so Misha Donskov could be coaching as late as mid-June with Dallas. And I just think I don't think we should be relying on the availability of somebody else that's currently on a cup run. So I think Marco Sturm makes a lot of sense from a timing perspective and from a candidacy perspective. So if you guys are okay with that, I would like to bring him in. I don't know if you wanted to get specifics on a term in AAV situation, Scott. I don't know if you were that prepared with the coach, because I'm not. So I think we're just gonna.
It
doesn't affect the roster. So
and a lot of times we never hear about what the number actually is. So
yeah,
we don't necessarily know.
Yeah, right. You pretty much only get the numbers when it's like one of the biggest contracts ever, because then that tends to leak. But yeah, no, I don't think we need to get into that.
All right, so we'll just make Marco the highest paid coach of all time. 1 year, $100 million contract. All right, moving on.
I was gonna say 6.9 years, 6.9 million a year.
That's perfect, Scott. There you go.
I'm gonna kick. Do I have to kick you out already? Oh my gosh.
Okay, so that gets us to where we're going to be spending most of today. Now, Scott, I know you mentioned that we have our own UFAs to make decisions on, but I really do feel like because of their UFA status, I want to focus on the RFAs, see how much money we have there, and then I'm just going to treat the Bruins UFAs like the rest of the UFA class mainly because of who they are. I mean, we're talking Cole Koepke, Henry Yoki-Haru, and was there one more? Parker Wotherspoon, I think. So
yeah. And then like there's a couple Providence guys that maybe we might want to consider as, do we see them on the NHL roster next year? That we can just throw out there.
Okay, so let's kind of just keep it to the RFAs for just for now, and I want to start this conversation by letting our listeners know for our player next contract projections, we are using, well, at least I've been using AFP Analytics, and it's not just a run of the mill Twitter account or website. They put a lot of time and effort and use a lot of resources in coming into these contracts. Whether we end up using them or not, they're good baselines, and I recommend anybody out there also checking them out because it really is helpful.
I think you tweeted it. Yes, no, we might.
And it's free. So like if you just go to @AFP Analytics on Twitter, I think it's their pinned tweet, so it's right at the top of their page, and yeah, it's just a big Google spreadsheet that anyone can click into.
That I spent like 8 hours in yesterday.
Yeah, when you said you spent 8 hours making a spreadsheet, I was gonna say, why'd you make one? They have it all ready for you, but I think you meant researching it.
I have a screenshot of it that I plan on showing later, so you know.
Okay. All right. So let's. Yeah, Scott, go ahead.
I was gonna say, well, the last thing we should note is just what the Bruins cap situation and roster looks like going in. So, using Puckpedia for this, they currently have the Bruins at 11 players signed to NHL contracts on the Boston roster, accounting for $66.68 million. So the salary cap next year is going to be $95.5 million. That leaves the Bruins with $28.82 million. Obviously, that does not include guys who, or maybe it's not obvious, so I'll just say it. That does not include guys who finished the year down in Providence. So Matt Poitras, Fraser Minton, Fabian Lysell. For our starting point, using Puckpedia, those guys are not counting against the cap because they finished the year on the Providence roster. So if we envision those guys starting next year in Boston, any of them, then we'll add their cap hits to the books.
So with those numbers in mind that Scott just said, and I'll reiterate them in a second, what I'm going to do right now to get everybody on the same starting point is Morgan Geekie, Mason Lohrei, Johnny Beecher, Marat Husnudinov, and Jacob Lauko are the Bruins restricted free agents heading into the summer. I'm going to read off for all of you what AFP has them projected at for new contracts. And if the Bruins signed all of these guys at these projections, what that would bring their salary cap down to heading into UFA season on July 1. Obviously, the three of us aren't going to have this same allowance remaining, but if the Bruins were to sign all these players at these contracts, okay. So just from the top, NHL salary cap, 95.5. Bruins under current contract is $66,681,667. Again, Scott just mentioned that's with some people down in Providence at the moment. Current salary cap space remaining, $28,818,333. Okay. Morgan Geekie is projected to make $6.5 million per year at 4 years. Mason Lohrei has two projections, a long-term and a short-term. The long-term projection is $5.4 million per year at 6 years. The short-term projection is $3 million per year at 2 years. Johnny Beecher is expected to make $1.5 million per year at 2 years. Marat Husnudinov is expected to sign for $924,000 per year at 2 years. And Jacob Lauko is projected to sign $1.17 million per year for 1 year.
So I can already tell you Brian didn't make the spreadsheet because Marat got way, way less than what Brian would give him. So
the only untouchable in the league besides Connor McDavid, but we'll get to that. We'll get to that shortly. So I
thought it was weird as we took over the Bruins front office that the first thing Brian requested from the Jacobs family was enough money to pay for a Martha's Vineyard weekend retreat of whining and dining Marat Husnudinov. And I was like,
come on.
I was like, Brian, he's an RFA. I don't think we need to do all this.
Guys, come on. You're gonna
say
now.
Statue. I thought you were gonna say statue.
Listen, guys, this podcast is public, and I don't need Don's Loshmelis hearing my affinity for Marat. I don't need this right now. Okay, so please.
Oliver Wahlstrom?
Oh my God, guys, can we please stop putting him under the gun here? I'm going to say something I'm going to hear about later. Okay, so if the Bruins signed all of those players at those projections, and for Lohrei, I'm going to use the short-term projection at $3 million for 2 years.
Which I also did for mine. Yeah. I gave him a bridge deal.
So if the Bruins signed all of those players at those projections, they would be left with $15.7 million in cap space. Bridget and Scott, I don't know about you guys. I want Boston to have a little bit more than that. And so with that, I think we can start to maybe talk about these players and what they should sign for. I don't know if you guys have a unanimous contract of from those projections that you don't have an issue with, and we can decide on those right now. Maybe to get those off, like for example, not to be funny, but like Murat Husnudinov for less than $1 million at 2 years, like I would be fine with that.
Yeah, same. That's the one where I'm like, I don't even really have to try to negotiate or do anything with that. Like, that works. 925,000 for Husnudinov.
Yeah, I think it's
that's
24.
very reasonable.
It's 24 to be specific, but yeah, same. I don't know. That is funny why AFP was that specific, 924 over 925. But hey, I'm not gonna question them.
It's because like they're very mathematical, where it like spits out a very precise number. But yeah, obviously not all the time, but a lot of contracts do tend to be round numbers. Either end in a 5 or 0 there, but not every time. So maybe it would be 924.
So I updated the remaining cap to after, like, if you were to sign all those RFAs, but I actually am not signing all of those RFAs. I don't know if there's anyone you guys think we should not extend a qualifying offer to of that list.
I can move on from Johnny Beecher.
I also was not extending a qualifying offer to Johnny Beecher.
So before we get there, even though you guys just got there, so just to be clear, so we're crossing Kuzi off, like he's off. He is being signed for 2 years at 925, 924.
Yes.
We're good with that.
Yeah.
So let's just account for that contract now. And as far as Beecher goes, if the 1.5 is if there's no ability to come down from that, then he is I am not qualifying him. I wouldn't sign him personally, I wouldn't sign him for more than maybe 975. That's just me. So if it's something like that, I would consider it. But if you guys don't think that his representatives will bite on that, then I'm gone. Then I'm done with them.
Yeah, well. I mean, I think he probably ends up signing for less than 1.5. Like I just don't really imagine a guy who at one point went 70 plus games without scoring a goal going for $1.5 million. But even at a lower price, I think I'm just willing to take my chances elsewhere. Look, Beecher does some things that I like. He is pretty good defensively. He can kill penalties. He's fast. But I need fourth liners who either bring some offense or bring some energy. And I don't think he brings enough of either.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I don't, even beyond the scoring struggles, the speed to me is not utilized nearly enough or effectively enough. And so I just don't think he makes plays at a high enough level, to be honest with you. And so, like I said, unless he was willing to sign for 975 or less than $1 million, that's what I'd have to that's what would have to be for me to consider keeping him. But to your point, Scott, even in that situation, I'm not in love with the player either way. So if you guys are okay with moving on from him and letting him test the waters, then I am too. So we can make that decision right now.
All right. I think that's probably done. And when I was considering it, I just felt like the writing was kind of on the wall. And that there were just, though he was with the team the whole season, and I guess he was a little bit banged up, he mentioned in breakup day, it just felt like he didn't do enough to keep himself in that fourth line role. And there are just so many guys in the system around the league that can fill a fourth line role and potentially provide more of an offensive upside, or, have their own dynamics to bring. And now that they have Fraser Minton in the system, and I feel like they just have these other options, and that Beecher probably, I wouldn't be surprised if Don Sweeney said, go ahead and test test the rest of the league out because I don't think they're going to give him an offer. But
okay, so who's the DNF we have on the books for 924? Beecher, we're going to let him move on. Jacob Lauko. Let's just go to him real quick. I think it's easier maybe to get these smaller ones out of the way before we go to the other two. But Jacob Lauko is projected 1.17 million, I believe is what I said. His current cap hit is 787,500. I like Lauko. I think he brings some of those intangibles that Scott is looking for in a role that Beecher was playing, just somebody who can provide energy, use their speed and tenacity. But has Jacob Lauko earned that much of a raise for what he is and what he does? I think 117 is a little expensive. I'm not really too up in arms about it, but I would like to still get him closer to $1 million, maybe a little bit less.
Yeah, and I think you can, because like I don't think he's done enough to earn a whole lot of a pay raise. So yeah, I would be interested in keeping Lauko around at $1 million or less, which seems doable to me. I guess if for some reason he's looking for more than that, then you let him go. But I'm kind of gonna operate under the assumption that he likes it here and isn't exactly gonna drive much of a hard bargain. He doesn't. It's not like he had a great season. Like he doesn't have a lot to stand on, but you like his energy. You like kind of the presence he brings to the team and to the room, and he also feels like someone who, I think can be a 13th forward. Like if you're just thinking about rounding out a roster, right? We've talked before. Like you can't have a younger kid in a 13th forward or 7th defenseman role because if they're still developing, they need to play. Like that's why like when Jacob Zaboral was the 7th defenseman and he went like 2 months without playing a game, it's like that wasn't ideal for anyone. There's that's not going to work. Like Lauko, I think is kind of at a point where he's not really developing anymore. You know exactly what he is. He doesn't have to be in the lineup every night, so he sort of fits that role nicely, I think.
Okay, so
I had him as my extra forward in my math. So, and I'll just say I like the energy he brings. I think that I had him in at $1 million just to keep it round. $1 million contract to fit under the cap. I think that's probably pretty fair for him, and he adds a little bit of an extra element of, he's got a little bit of an edge, and he'll fight, he'll protect his line mates. I don't see any issue with bringing him back. So he's another RFA I would sign.
Okay, so Scott, do you have any rebuttals to the $1 million price tag, or is that good for you?
No, that's fine.
Okay. So 1 year, 1 million for him.
Sounds. I think you could probably get him even less, but like let's just say like that works.
Okay. All right. Moving on. Do you guys want to go to Lorai or do you want to go to Geeky?
I think Geeky first.
Yeah, let's do Geeky. He's the big one.
Okay. So what did I say his projection was? Boy.
4 years, 6.5 is what.
4 years, 6.5. Okay, so I understand that there's an argument to be made. He's a 30-goal scorer, and that the price tag for that benchmark is what it is on the open market, especially on the open market if you're a UFA. But for me, I look at him and I say, well, he's not a UFA, he's an RFA. And I do think that gives the team certain control in the situation. And I don't look at somebody who scores 30 goals once, whether it's Morgan Geeky or anybody else for that matter, and say, okay, they've earned this for the next 6 years, because there's a lack of track record there, whether it's the player's fault or not. Maybe the player is only 23 and he hasn't had so many chances to be a 30-goal scorer. I'm not saying Morgan Geeky can't be a 30-goal scorer for the next 6 years or 5 years or 4 years, but I personally have a tough time paying this price tag for somebody who's done it once, and I'm not just taking away from what he did. I'm just trepidatious giving him a $6.5 million annual value right now. And I don't know if you guys are comfortable with that. I would like to see him more between 5 and 5.5, but I'll let you guys give your opinions on the 6.5 and what you think he should be at.
Yeah, I think realistically he's probably going to get more than 5.5. I look at this and I see 4 years, 6.5 million, and can we negotiate that to maybe giving an extra year and getting it down closer to 6? Like, can we eventually negotiate towards 5 years, 6 million a year? And that becomes a deal that I would be okay with. I guess ultimately, if push comes to shove, 4 by 6.5, I think I would do. But I've had 5 by 6 in my mind for a while, and that still feels like kind of the right number to me.
Yeah,
Where 6.5 AAV does feel a little high.
it does feel high because of the restriction, right? Like being an RFA, you kind of got to imagine that you don't quite have the same leverage. So I do think that you probably could get him at 6 million, but do you guys want to just go ahead with a 6.5 just for in the, with the idea of the exercise being we have to try to fit under the cap, and in case like they do have to give him extra,
I mean, I'll be honest. Like his most recent cap hit is 2 million.
True.
Like I think a 30 goal season, which is great. I think is that a $4.5 million raise? I have trouble doing that, and I guess like if you're telling me, do you keep him at 6.5 or he's gone? I just think the Bruins are in a situation where beggars can't be choosers, and they're not really in a position for this. And I think that maybe the player and his agent know that. I still am not comfortable with 6.5. I mean, if based off what you guys are saying, for me, best case scenario would be 5.75. But I would go to 6 or low 6s. But I have a tough time looking at 130 goal season. And again, I'm not trying to discredit it, but is that a $4.5 million raise? $130 million season? I know the market dictates those things, and I'm not trying to make it black and white, but I don't know. That's just a lot. That's a hefty raise for a 130 goal season.
Yeah, I don't think you can really look at how big of a raise it is, because I mean, a player could go from a rookie contract making 900,000 and their next contract could, it's just like, what are they worth? Just what does the market dictate is their worth? And I think the reality is that with the cap going up, I'm not going to say every guy, like I'm not going to box myself in, but I think most 30 goal scorers are, I think, easily going to be clearing 5 million and probably into the $6+ million neighborhood. Now, one thing worth considering here is, because we have to account for everything, so we get a plan for this. What if, say, we don't get Geeky, obviously we're issuing Geeky a qualifying offer. We're keeping our rights on him. Let's say we don't get an extension done by July 1, and now other teams can potentially offer sheet him. So to set this up, the offer sheet threshold for restricted free agents. So we're talking about this like anywhere from 5.5 to 6.5. So that would fall into a threshold of offer sheets from 4.68 million to 7.02 million per year. The compensation for that is a first and third round pick if the team chooses not to match. If someone went over 7.02, say offered him 7.1 million a year, the Bruins could take that and get a first, second, and third round pick. So I'm wondering, are you guys open at, are you going to say someone comes in and offers them 6.7 a year? Are you going to match, or are you going to take a first and third round pick for him?
If they offered 6.7 a year?
Yeah, say like high sixes. Yeah, 6.7 or 6.8.
You would have to be literally throwing away your like not necessarily like fully throwing away your season, but like you'd have to. That would really change what you do this season, like whether or not you're thinking of trying to get back to the playoffs, and like if you can't manage to add someone in free agency to fill that gap, like. But I guess you could. I mean, I guess it's somebody takes them, you get the picks, you then have that theoretically about $6 million that you thought you were going to spend on him to go do something else. But then you have this extra hole, and it's a first line hole, and it's not an easy hole to fill.
And it's a chemistry with Pastrnak hole. You already know Morgan Geekie has it. There's no guarantee that, okay, well, we let him go, we take the picks, we're going to turn around and spend $7 million on someone else, or, you know, even more than that on a first liner. Like, there's no guarantee that guy has chemistry with Pastrnak.
Well, and the great equalizer is that the salary cap continues to rise. Again, right now we're talking about a 95.5 cap, and 2 or 3 seasons from now we're talking about a cap of 113. So all of these contracts, they're around the league. They're gonna age better than worse just because of the natural progression of the salary cap. The salary cap was stagnant for a long time. I guess
as we have breaking news.
Oh
yeah, what?
Bruins have signed general manager Don Sweeney to a 2-year extension.
What?
Wow.
I thought this was our job.
I know.
When did we decide on that?
They're taking it back.
When did we decide on that, guys?
What the heck? We just took over.
Okay. Well, Scott, I know that probably means, you know, you'll have to start writing it or something soon. I don't know if, but
I can do it after the episode. We're far enough in here.
Okay. So, I mean, that obviously, wow, that's a lot to chew on. We'll have to get to that later because we are in the middle of a business meeting, guys, for crying out loud. All right. So,
throw us off our game.
The great equalizer is a salary cap going up. I think push comes to shove. Could you find a top 6 skill right wing in free agency for cheaper and take that risk? Because ultimately you do have to have a bit of a realistic perspective. The Bruins going to go from the 5th worst team in the league, granted with bad injuries and stuff included, to a Stanley Cup champion or contender next year? No. So like I know that's not fun to think about, but like they do have to toe that line of wanting to be competitive and get better, but if you can't let one player that had 130 goal season, you can't let him take it to the cleaners. I just don't think the Bruins are in that position right now. So I don't like signing Geekie for $6.7 million. I'm sorry. If he was offer sheeted that, I don't know if I would match that. But here we're talking about the $6.5 million. Is there any way that we can get that a little bit between 6.5 and 6 here, or like?
I think that it'd be reasonable to say they could get the contract at like 6.25.
I'm good. I'm comfortable with that if you guys are for this.
And put that in as the number.
Okay. I think you might have to add a year, but yeah, like I said, like the number I would like is 5 years, $6 million. But if we get negotiated up and end up at 6.25, I guess ultimately I'm okay with that.
I'm also okay with 5 and 6. I mean, adding an extra year is not a problem. I'm not concerned about the term with him. He's young enough. I mean, if the two of you think, because I do think this is an important contract as when it comes to the butterfly effect of the rest of this series. So I do want to give this one some serious consideration. And do you think that 5 at 6 is realistic? Because if you guys do, I'm cool with that too. I don't need to go with the 4-year projection here. If that's something you think that the player would go for.
I believe that the Bruins, based on comments at breakup day, are willing to give a longer contract than 4 years to him. So like the willingness is there, I think.
I think 5 and 6 is fair.
Okay. So you want me to make that the number in the spreadsheet?
I think so. I mean, yeah.
I think that works.
These projections that AFP put out, they're projections and they're highly educated, but yeah, I mean, if the Bruins would go 5, I mean, then that could bring it down to 6, then I'm comfortable with that. So we have Husnudinov at 924. We have Beecher moving on from Lauko at $1 million and Morgan Geekie at $6 million.
All right. Also, before we move on to Lorai, who I think is probably going to be next, I just want to read the statement from ownership on Sweeney getting the extension, if that's okay.
Well, do we want to finish this exercise and then do that all at the end?
Sure. Yeah, that works. Either way, I just want to say, like, we'll get to, because I'm sure people heard us just say, oh, they signed Sweeney to a 2-year contract extension, and we just kind of like blew by it, but we will talk about it.
Yeah, no, we'll definitely spend some time on it at the end.
Okay.
I think Lorai might be the only RFA remaining. We can conclude on him, and then see what we have left for salary cap after those contracts that we've just come to. And we could probably put this exercise for the most part on ice until part 2, and maybe we can go back to the Sweeney stuff. So, okay, so like we talked about, Mason Lohrei has 2 projections. I'm just going to reiterate them real quick. And I should pull up my thing here. Lohrei. Okay, long-term projection, 6 years, 5.5 million. Short-term projection, 2 years, 3 million, which is the bridge deal that all of us here agree with that conceptually should be the case. I don't know how that long-term projection would ever come to fruition based off of last year. No disrespect to the player, but he has a lot to improve on defensively. So I think the 3 of us here are very comfortable omitting that long-term projection and working around the short-term one at 2 years, 3 million. How do you guys feel about that value?
I thought that I was fine with it. I think that that's probably pretty accurate.
I want to negotiate down. Like, I'm willing to play hardball here because I don't know what Mason Lohrei has done to deserve $3 million a year. Like, even with the offensive production, and he did put up some points, and we know what he can do offensively. To me, he was a net negative overall. Like, especially 5-on-5, he was not. The real flaws defensively in his game still remain. I know, in negotiations, like, point totals are an easy thing to point to. So I'm sure he's going to point to other defensemen who, have put up those kind of points. And I think that's what AFP does. And 3 million seems fair, but
is there anyone that's going to point to the plus minus number?
Yeah. I mean, that's part of it. Yeah. 5-on-5 plus minus, like, all of it. So I'm confident we can negotiate lower than 3 million a year on a bridge deal. That feels more like a ceiling to me, and I don't think we have to settle for that, even if this drags through the summer and we're looking at like getting up against an arbitration deadline. Like I said, this is one where if Lohrei isn't willing to do, say, 2 years, 2.5 million, knock 500,000 off, I'm willing to play some hardball here.
2 years at 2.5 is what I had in my mind as the most that I would give him for the reasons that you have laid out. So
I will say that when I was doing this, I kind of just went under the assumption that I was kind of going to get screwed over on some contracts. Like, I was going to have to overpay on some contracts. And so I went with some of the higher numbers just in my estimates because negotiations don't always go as you plan. And I wasn't just going to sit here and, put cheap deals for everyone because that's what I think that they deserve, because, maybe the market doesn't bear that out. Though I think that Lohrei probably should fall under $3 million, I was kind of looking at that number as like, all right, it's fair enough that if you're just if you do really believe he's in your long-term future, to keep him happy in the short term, maybe you do something like that. And I didn't think it really killed you, but I certainly wasn't willing to do the longer term contract. Yeah. And the bridge deal makes the most sense. So, I mean, that's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking maybe he's sitting there trying to negotiate that long term. And then so you have to consider that as part of what's going on with this too. So because he has those 2 options, it's probably going to be a pretty difficult negotiation to come to a number with him.
I guess what I would say maybe as a counter to that is if Mason Lohrei is trying to negotiate for a long-term deal right now, to me, he's kind of negotiating from a low point. Like, yeah, I would think he might want to do a bridge deal because that gives him 2 years to prove that he can be a legit top 4 defenseman. He can improve his defensive play. And then in 2 years, he cashes in at, again, if he believes in himself and bets on himself, at a higher AAV than what was the long-term projection? 5 point something?
Yeah, I think it was 5.4.
Yeah. Like, if he proves himself as a top 4 defenseman in the next 2 years with the cap going up, now he's looking at like 7 million a year. So I don't really know exactly how Mason Lohrei's wired. Like, does he just want long-term security now? Or, he seems to me like someone who believes in himself. So he might be willing to do the bridge deal.
I just think that Mason Lohrei is in a position for the Bruins to keep him happy right now. He has a lot to prove for them. And I think that's why you land on the bridge deal. And I just think that the nature of bridge deals, the undertone of bridge deals is prove it. Prove it. You want that raise, prove it. Until then, there's a reason you're getting a bridge deals because you have much to prove. So we're not going to curtsy to you right now, Mason. Like you're gonna make 2.5 the next 2 years, which is damn good money in this world. And if you prove to be who you think you are, then you will get that term and value in 2 years' time, which is not that long. So again, I just don't think that you can be the league leader in plus minus and have demands. I just don't see it, especially for a young player. And I know him and Zadorov are both playing over their heads, playing minutes that they shouldn't have been playing, matchups they shouldn't have been playing due to injuries to McAvoy and Hampus Lindholm. But for that, even for that reason, so Lohrei, like I think the Bruins are penciling him in on the third pair next year. So I just think that 2.5 is fair for a bridge deal for a young player that still has very much to prove defensively. His offensive ceiling is nice, but he's not a forward; he's a defenseman. So
my third pair is Lohrei Peak for next year. So yes, and Peak
wasn't a great third pair this year.
It was not. But when beggars can't be choosers with what else, what the other ideas were for the roster, that's kind of what you have. So what's the final number for this contract annually?
I'm okay with 2.5.
Yeah, I feel like we can get there. Like, Bridget, you're right. Like, we do have to guard against, like, are we just thinking we can get, like, quote unquote team friendly on a bunch of these? But to me, that feels fair. Like I said, it might drag on. This might be, hey, they actually filed for arbitration and a date gets scheduled and it gets done last minute. Like, think Trent Frederick 2 years ago, right? Like, Bruins and Trent Frederick filed for arbitration. They put their briefs together. They had a date scheduled, and then they got a deal. They eventually got a deal across the finish line before they actually had to go to a hearing. Like, maybe this drags on like that, but I think 2.5 on a 2-year deal is realistic.
And also, if you look at this RFA class, guys, this is not the most established RFA class among for an NHL team. I mean, we're talking about Husnudinov, who has yet to be a full-time NHL player in his career. Jacob Lauko is a fourth-line player in this league. Johnny Beecher is a unproven, in my opinion, fourth-line player. He's a fourth-liner in the league, but how good is he at that role? TBD. And then the two prize RFAs we're talking about is Mason Lohrei, a young, offensively skilled defenseman who has much to improve on the defensive side of the puck, which is his position. And then Morgan Geekie, who is a 26-year-old one-time 30-goal scorer, which is great. Looking forward to him being around for the future. But he still has some proving to do. And people are going to keep knocking him for the fact that he only plays with Pastrnak when he produces at this level. Well, fine, but like Pasternak's not going anywhere. My point is, none of these RFAs are in a position to demand more than what their projections are. And in most cases, I think these projections are just slightly high. And these players are not in powerful positions based off of tenure and pedigree in the league, in my opinion. So if we're talking about if let's say like Pavel Zacha, for example, or what was an RFA right now, somebody who's been around for a little bit, at least has 2 or 3 seasons at around 60, it would be a little bit tougher, I think, to knock that down. But these players, they're young enough and they're unproven enough where I don't think we're looking for the cheapest deals. I just think that these players aren't in major positions of power right now.
And and the RFA status as well,
Right.
I did find some of the projections to be low. I'm not saying on any of the guys we just talked about, but there was, when I was going through some of the UFA numbers, they had Brad Marchand way lower than what he's going to get. Like Marchand's getting over 7 million. I think they had him projected at like 5.5, and that was way low. So anyway, yeah, that's why I had to. Though we used those projections as a good way to kind of compare, we did kind of, I'm sure, all in our own mind go, "Ooh, that's not." I don't think that's what's going to happen. Because if that was the number for Marchand, the Bruins would have just signed him.
Yeah.
And like his
I mean,
playoff,
they already offered him more than that. So
they already offered him more than that. So he's obviously getting, like, he's going to be getting 7 or more. So, so yeah. Anyway, did we want to get to the
Just
UFAs?
well, I think so. Just real quick before we, so right now with these contracts, okay, we have, and I don't think I'm mistaken. I think we're at 18,394,333. That's our updated cap space remaining, I believe. If we're talking about 924 from Husnudinov.
Yeah, you're right.
1 million from Lauko, 6 million from Geeky, and 2.5 for Lorai. We didn't qualify off for Beecher. So right now we are at 18,394,333. This is excluding adding back in a Patra or a Fraser Minton or something like that, who are currently on the Providence books. That to me is a pretty good place to be when we're starting to talk about UFAs, which whether it's Bruins UFAs right now or UFAs in the open market, given the part 2 nature of this, and also we want to talk about the Sweeney stuff, maybe we can leave this here if you guys are comfortable with that, and then pick up the UFAs in part 2.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Man, I spent so much of my time yesterday on stuff we're not talking about.
We're doing it Thursday. Relax.
Patience,
guys.
Patience. Part 2. Okay, so before we talk about Sweeney, we have hired Marco Sturm as the Boston Bruins' next head coach. We have signed Murat Husnudinov for 2 years, $924,000. We are moving on from Johnny Beecher. We are signing Jacob Lauko to 1 year, $1 million contract. We are signing Morgan Geeky to 5 years at $6 million. And we're signing Mason Lohrei to a 2-year, $2.5 million bridge deal. And that leaves us with a cap space remaining of $18,399,000. I can't even read my own handwriting. Is it 399?
394, I think is what you said.
My handwriting is brutal. So that leaves us with 18,394,333 of cap space heading into UFA.
Yeah, and we're up to 8 forwards, 5 defensemen, 2 goalies under NHL contracts. And as we mentioned before, that as of now does not include like Fraser Minton, Matt Patra, or anyone else in Providence yet.
Cool, very fun. I know Bridget's itching, but we'll get there Thursday. Don't worry, that's the fun. That's the fun stuff.
Don't give me any more time to overthink this.
All right, major news.
Bridget's going to show up on Thursday with the Charlie from Always Sunny Pepe Silvia board with just like clippings and red yarn all over the place.
Yep, that's going to be my backdrop next week. I'll have to move the Scott's Pops signature.
All right, guys. Major news just broke. We're going to touch on it briefly because we have to. We have to take advantage of breaking news. Clearly, Don Sweeney being re-signed for a 2-year extension right now. I do think that this has somewhat to do with the coaching search. I do think that there is something to be said out there, despite Don Sweeney saying at the end of the year press conferences about, hey, no one's going to not take a call for the Boston Bruins head coach, one of the most historic jobs. Well, 15 people have taken the calls. He's right about that, but there's still a step to be had when it comes to actually signing the contract. I do wonder if his what's the phrase that people say when someone's on the last year of their contract?
Lame duck.
Lame duck. I knew it was some sort of animal. Lame duck may not have been lame. The lame otter may not have been great for coaches trying to sign here because, like, oh, what if Sweeney gets fired? What does that mean for me? Well, now prospective head coaches know that Don Sweeney is around for 2 more years. So there's that.
Yeah, that was kind of where my mind went is, because look, I asked Cam Neely about this on breakup day. Did he want to extend Sweeney now, or could he go through the season without an extension in place? And Cam Neely at the time said he was still thinking about it, about what his decision was going to be. obviously he has now made a decision, and I think it's absolutely fair to wonder if the coaching search is a factor here. Yeah, it's one thing, as you said, it's one thing for sure. Anyone's going to take the call. It's the Boston Bruins, and there's only 32 NHL head coaching jobs. There's probably 300 coaches who want them. So yeah, of course you're going to take the call. But like you said, then committing to a team, depending on what caliber coach you are or what your other options might be. I do wonder if that came up, whether it was, made clear to be a sticking point or, I don't know if it rose to the level of like candidates not wanting the job. I'd be a little surprised if it got to that level, but I do wonder if it was a question that came up, like, hey, I know you're on the last year of your contract. What does that mean for me if Don Sweeney isn't extended? And, like Cam Neely can come down and be like, oh, you'd be safe. Like, don't worry about it. But what if the next GM that they hire a year from now wants his own coach? Like, I highlighted this at the time. It's why I asked Cam the question. Like, it's completely fair to wonder how coaches would approach that and whether it would hurt them at all in their search. So I think this does now provide more certainty. It's obviously not the only reason you do it. If Cam Neely had concluded that, he doesn't really want to commit to Don Sweeney moving forward, you're not going to do it just because of the coaching search. But I can certainly see that being a factor and kind of nudging him in this direction.
And just to fully clarify too, this is a 2-year contract extension. He will be here for 3 years now. He's under contract for the next 3 years is the total.
Yes.
So
through the 2027-28 season.
So that's three years that he's at least under contract. And I guess that is kind of like a little bit of a sigh of relief for a coach that, they trust him. And I don't know about you guys, but on breakup day, I didn't get any indication that they were ready to move on from Don Sweeney. I thought that everything was pretty positively said. And I want to read the statement that we got from Cam Neely about the decision. He said, Don has navigated a disappointed period for our club with conviction, purpose, and a clear vision toward the future of the Boston Bruins. He made difficult decisions around the trade deadline with the confidence they will pay dividends as we craft the path back to contention. He is continuing to follow that track with a robust and thorough search of our club's next head coach, while also preparing for the upcoming NHL draft and free agent signing period. I am confident in the plan he has followed these past few months and excited for what's to come for our team. The expectations in Boston have always been clear. It's about winning championships.
Yeah. And I'll just to add on, I'll read Sweeney's statement as well. He says, I am very appreciative to Charlie, the entire Jacobs family, and to Cam for their continued trust and support. It's an honor to be part of a franchise with such a storied history and passionate fan base. I fully understand and embrace the responsibility that comes with this role. Our fans have high expectations for this team, and so do I. The collective goal is to build a team that makes Bruins fans proud and ultimately brings another Stanley Cup back to Boston.
Well, yeah, I think that at the end of the season last year, I remember making a comment about, I don't know why the Bruins would sign Don Sweeney to an extension before the season until they see that he's done a good enough job with getting this team back to where they want to be next year. And that was met with the counter argument of, yes, but that could leave vulnerability for a head coach down the line. Like, what does that mean for me if he goes? And that is actually, that counter argument is how it's actually played out. And I also did kind of change my opinion on that because I saw the merit to that, which is, yeah, that's not good for a head coach to come in with a lame duck GM. So then you would have another counter argument of, well, okay, but why does that head coach have to be, or why does that GM have to be Don Sweeney? And you can fire Don Sweeney in the offseason, bring in a new GM, bring in his. What's that? Yeah.
Hire the three of us.
Hire us three, because that's what somebody could say. Okay, I understand the lame duck GM, and that's tough to hire a coach. So then fire the GM. Fire the GM. Bring in a new GM. Let him hire his guy. Now you get a new GM, and the head coach won't be afraid of a lame duck GM. But to the statement that Bridget just read, and you, Scott, but mainly Bridget's, and how management feels about and ownership feels about Don Sweeney, that clearly just wasn't going to happen. Like they're boys, as they say.
Yeah,
they are boys.
I think he is the smartest, best qualified person to do what they need to do right now and to get themselves back into contention. Like the only way you can read into it is that I don't think that they think there's anybody better. I think they really trust him. I think that they take into consideration how highly regarded he is among other GMs or among the hockey world to be the GM of Canada. I think they see it like they'd be making a mistake if they moved on from him, because he would be so highly sought after by other teams. And he's been there a long time. They trust him. They think the vision is good and they believe he can get it done. And so there you go. He gets the extension. And I wonder, guys, because we know now that there's been at least that first step of the interview process of getting on like a Zoom call or phone call, like the preliminary getting in touch with people, gauging interest, having some early conversations. We know that part's well underway. We know Elliot Freeman was reporting that who aren't they talking to? And it sounded like he had a list of over 15 people that they had already been in contact with. So do you think maybe this was a theme that came up of concern among some of the early conversations where say Sweeney's talking to them and they say, well, actually though, like I'm a little bit worried that if you like me, but then the next guy doesn't like me, I'm gone, I could be gone within a year or two.
Yeah, I mean that's exactly what I was saying. Like I think it's absolutely fair. I also think it might matter for free agents. Less so because they'll just be happy to take the contract. But maybe there's free agents out there who want to know that there's some organizational consistency moving forward, and there's not going to be like major turnover in the next year.
I'll tell you, Zadorov sounded pretty confident in him.
Well, sure, of course, players are going to say that. They have to. But yeah, I mean, I've said like I thought this decision was made at the trade deadline. Mm-hmm. You don't let Don Sweeney sell the way that he sold, make such franchise-altering moves without some assurance that he's going to be the guy to oversee what comes next.
Yep.
Like, you just don't. If you think you're going to have another GM in the summer, then you say, Don, we're only making small moves. And then you save the bigger stuff for the summer with the new general manager. And they didn't do that. They let him do it at the deadline. That, to me, told me he was at least here through the summer. And then once you do that, it's like, yeah, you kind of have to extend him because it becomes problematic if you don't. Because now, how quickly is he trying to build? Is he now trying to rush the process of building back because he thinks he's, GMing for his job? He thinks he has to make the playoffs next year to save his job, and the whole coaching search. Like, it's absolutely a factor. So, yeah, I mean, I guess like the big question that we haven't even really gotten to yet, because obviously we're explaining, I think, why this happened when it did. But I guess the more important question is just, should it have happened? Like, do you guys think they should have extended Don Sweeney? Because really the two options are extend him now for all the reasons we've talked about, or fire him and have a new GM this offseason.
Yeah, I mean, there's realistically what should have happened, and then there's what I could have wanted to happen. But in order for Don Sweeney to have been fired, they would have needed a different ownership and a different president, because until they miss the playoffs multiple times and they get forced into firing him, he's their guy, whether I like it or not. So I just don't see a way where they were firing him, because if you're gonna, the president's not going anywhere, and the ownership is staying the same. So for the sake of organizational stability, which is what we're talking about, which is people around the league that are interviewing for head coaching positions, possible UFAs and others, they need to look at the Bruins organization and know that they are stable enough so that their position could potentially be stable in the organization as well. And if Bruins ownership and Cam Neely have zero intentions of firing Don Sweeney, then the responsible thing to do in that situation is to stabilize Sweeney's tenure for a little bit longer. Whether Brian would have resigned him or not, or Bridger or Scott, it's the Jacobs are who they are, and Neely is who he is. So it's the people we're talking about that are making these decisions. I don't think they had the you know what's to do it, because they like, I think Sweeney in a lot of ways is he's a yes man, but he's also somebody that they view as credible and intelligent around the league. And so I personally think that I don't think Don Sweeney has deserved a 3-year tenure right now going forward, 2-year extension on top of a year remaining. I don't think he's deserved it. How can you say he's deserved it? But there's gamesmanship involved. There's perceptions involved, and the Bruins are trying to manage people that might want to enter the organization, and people want to enter the organization more if there's stability. And I think that, to your point about the trade deadline, Scott, Don Sweeney is not doing that, to your point, without that stamp of approval from ownership, which is why heading into the deadline, I was petrified that the Bruins weren't going to do what was necessary, which was sell. Brandon Carlo, Charlie Coyle were not long-term solutions in this organization. They were good players in the here and now in appropriate roles, but if we're talking long-term, moving off them wasn't a big deal. Trent Frederick, not a big deal. Marchand is a different story, but they did what they had to do at the deadline, and I didn't think they were going to do it because I didn't think ownership was going to give that approval, because that was going to concede on the season where they technically still could have made the playoffs. To ownership's credit, they did give him that green light, and Sweeney did do what should have been done. But I don't think that deserves a 2-year extension on top of a year remaining. But it's gamesmanship. They're trying to manage personalities and people entering the system. So I know it's not a clear answer, but it's just difficult because it's bigger than just Sweeney is my point. Right?
Yeah. And like, it's hard to answer those should they have game, or should they have moved on, because you then have to really deeply consider what the other options would have been. Like,
Yeah.
who's the other person then if it's not him?
Scott.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think the three of us would be the top candidate, but beyond that,
we'd be like Fluffy and Harry Potter, the three-headed dog, as the GM.
He's still making Harry Potter references after I got back from Harry Potter World. I like it.
But yeah, I mean, you look at, this offseason, like the Los Angeles Kings changed their GM. Rob Blake stepped down. They end up going with Ken Holland, who, on first glance has an impressive resume overseeing the Wings dynasty years. But then you look at like how that ended in Detroit with a team that really fell apart once Datsuk and Zetterberg retired, that he was not able to salvage or have a plan to get them back on track. Then he takes over an Oilers team. He inherits McDavid and Draisaitl. Couldn't get them over the top. They're now doing better without him. I don't know. If you move on from Sweeney earlier, do you want Ken Holland? There's arguments for and against. The Islanders are in the process of hiring a GM right now. It sounds like their finalists are Mark Bergevin, former Canadiens GM, and Matthew Darche, who is like the top assistant under Julien Brisebois down in Tampa Bay. So, I'll be honest, like I know what the Lightning as an organization have done. I don't know a ton about Matthew Darche individually and like what his strengths would be and whether he's truly ready. Bergevin's time in Montreal, I don't think there's like anything super impressive there, or certainly not anything that's any more impressive than what Sweeney's done. So yeah, like that is the other part of it is, are you making changes for the sake of making change, or is there someone you would be targeting that you believe would actually be a clear upgrade? Because there generally aren't as many like obvious good GM candidates as there are, say, coaching candidates, which is another reason GMs last longer than coaches, because they're, at least from the outside, there seem to be fewer legitimately good ones out there at any given time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think that they did what they kind of had to do on it, if we're being honest. And so I think that the only other part that you could say, which Brian already kind of did, was the other option besides getting rid of him and extending him was to wait out the season and see how he handles the rebuild, retool from, through the summer, through the free agency. But as Brian mentioned, there were drawbacks to just in terms of having conversations with free agents and coaches. And so that is why we are where we are.
Well, they could also get cutthroat too. Like, you never know. I mean, they could extend Sweeney right now for optics, for the outside when it comes to hiring a new coach, and just for stability, for the league to look at the Bruins and see some stability now. But that doesn't prevent them from firing him if they miss the playoffs next year. Or he doesn't have to see the end of his contract. Am I wrong about that?
You're not wrong. I mean, most likely, if he now has 3 years under contract left, I have to imagine he gets through 2 of them. Again, I kind of said the same thing about head coach. Like, I don't really see the Jacobs buying out 2 years. And in this case, it would be buying out a whole new contract, right? Like, this season is the last season of his current contract. The new contract kicks in next year. So to me, if things went bad enough this year that you're talking about firing Sweeney before his new contract even starts, then at that point you're also firing Cam Neely. Like, you have to. Like, that would be such a disaster to buy out a full contract that hasn't even started yet, that I really can't see it unless things are just like really significantly worse than any of us imagined this year.
Well, but the reality is they're starting this season already missing the playoffs once. So right now their playoff streak is at, or missing their playoffs. The streak's at 1. So I don't know if Mr. Jeremy Jacobs would be too thrilled about 2 playoff misses in a row and then keeping a GM, let alone 3. So, if they somehow made the playoffs last year and this extension happened, then yeah. But once the Bruins missed the playoffs once, certainly twice, I don't care how much they like the guy. The waters get murky at that point.
Well, but I guess what I would say is you can miss the playoffs this season and still see steps being taken.
That's true.
Like, maybe you like the coach you hired, the top 10 pick you made looks good. You signed someone in the offseason who looks like a difference maker, and all of it still isn't quite enough to get you in the playoffs, because the Bruins are that far away that, like, there is a pretty big gap here where they can improve and still miss the playoffs. But if you're feeling good about those things, then you're probably okay with Sweeney. But if your coach looks incompetent and your draft isn't, your 7th overall pick doesn't have a very good season wherever he's playing this year, and you made another big free agent signing that comes in and has an Elias Lindholm kind of impact, and you're like, what the hell is this? Like, that's how I think you get to disaster territory, where the Jacobs might be looking at wiping out the entire management team.
And say Swayman doesn't bounce back, and you're responsible for that contract, and it's not.
Now you got David Pastrnak asking for a trade or somebody like that. Obviously I'm being facetious, but if the Bruins go another year or 2 missing the playoffs, don't look now, but I mean, Pastrnak and McAvoy are approaching 30. Like, they would look around and say, okay, what are we building towards here? Because I'm not interested in missing the playoffs 2 or 3 years in a row with no end in sight heading into my 30s. So that could be, again, this is way in the future, but you don't want to get there, is my point, and they better be careful. So hopefully they don't live to regret infamously this extension, but I guess time will tell.
Yeah.
That probably wraps up for this episode. Any final thoughts from the two of you?
No, I think maybe we have I think we covered it pretty thoroughly. Maybe we have a little bit more to discuss if we see any kind of reports or anything on Thursday, I believe is when we're going to record our next episode, but that will be the brunt of that will be part 2 of our team building, where we will get into unrestricted free agents from other teams, Bruins own unrestricted free agents, not that they have that many of them, any trades we might want to make or offer sheets that we want to send in for other players. So I'm looking forward to that. I think that I think today was a great episode. Every episode of the Skate Pod is. I'm really excited for that one. Like, I think we're gonna have some pretty kind of differing opinions, targets, perspectives of where to go.
Yeah, no, that's where it gets interesting, and that's where I put all of my mental, I'm not even gonna say strength, but that's where I spent my time, and I can't wait to see what you say about some of the ideas that I had.
Well,
I was crazy, but they're definitely not things we've talked about. So,
yeah, I was curious to see what number we would come to for salary cap remaining after today. Now that I know what our number is, which is 18.3 and change, like that is a good basis to kind of heading into the next episode. Which also, now that Sweeney signed an extension, keep your eye out for that hiring, that coach hiring, head coaching hiring. I mean, maybe that comes this week. Sometimes news tends to happen quickly when the dominoes fall. So anyway, thank you all very much for listening. We hope you enjoyed this episode, because it was fun for us to do. It's going to continue to be fun, and play along in the comments. I mean, let us know if you think we're absolute morons with some of these contracts, or maybe you would have kept Johnny Beecher no matter what he asked for. But in any event, we appreciate the listenership, and we'll talk to you on Wednesday, I guess. Thursday. All right. Until then. Hey guys, thanks for watching the Skate Podcast. If you want to see more of our videos, visit our playlist.
Not in front of a screen? You can listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Don't forget to follow us on social media. And if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and leave a comment.